Hey guys, welcome back to GX Story Sleeping. Tonight we take a long, heavy-footed walk through the shadowy hallways of medieval Japan, specifically through the life of a woman who didn't exactly have it easy. Imagine you're born into a time where social class is everything, but being born female puts you squarely at the bottom regardless of your rank. From the moment you cry your first cry, your path is stitched tighter than your kimono sash. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing how global this sleepy little corner of the internet really is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the muffled rustle of silk. Not because you're fancy, but because even as a toddler, you're already wearing layered robes. The outermost layer has long trailing sleeves that seem designed to collect dust and spilled tea. Everything is tightly arranged. Your appearance, your posture, your future. As a girl in medieval Japan, you're likely to be part of the Heian aristocracy if you're dealing with this level of wardrobe drama. That sounds luxurious, until you realize your identity is pre-packed and hemmed in with fabric, expectations, and etiquette guides longer than a monastery chant. Your parents speak in hushed tones around you, plotting future matches and alliances, while you try not to trip over your third underrobe. A sneeze in public is a scandal. Scratching an itch? Social suicide. You're trained in the art of stillness, a talent that might sound spiritual, but mostly just cramps your legs. Smiling is fine, but don't show your teeth. Not unless they've been painted black with Ohaguro dye, a centuries-old fashion statement that screams high status but tastes like iron and vinegar. At this age, your teeth are still white, which makes you look suspiciously happy and tragically low class. But it's not all just clothes and smiles. You're expected to learn poetry by age 6, calligraphy by 7, and be able to layer your robes by color harmony and seasonal symbolism. Yes, that's a real thing. Heaven forbid you wear a winter collar in spring. One mainstream historical fact is that Heian noblewomen were rarely seen in public, hidden behind screens or curtains. If you speak to a man outside your family, you do it from behind silk panels. Your presence is ornamental, like a bonsai tree, trimmed, confined, and arranged for the admiration of others. There's some debate among historians about whether Heian women were more influential than we assume. After all, many authored poetry and even early novels under pseudonyms. Still, your words are only welcomed if they fit within the aesthetic of Mono no Aware, a kind of beautiful sadness. So, no complaining about foot pain. And let's not forget the fringe tidbit. Highborn girls often had their hair grown out their entire lives, untouched by scissors. Floor-length hair? Oh yes. But no conditioner. Imagine trying to nap with a 3-foot snake of hair coiled beside you like a well-behaved pet. At bedtime, you're not tucking into fluffy pillows and TikTok ASMR. Nope, your sleeping mat is stiff, your room drafty, and if it's winter, congratulations. You get an extra layer of brocade and the same chill as the garden koi. But you're lucky, right? You're nobility. Except, luck here means you get to sit still longer and be judged harder. Lower class girls may haul buckets and hoe fields, but at least they get to laugh out loud occasionally. There's no such thing as a personal dream. You are a family unit. Your existence is diplomacy stitched into cloth. And the funny thing is, you're too young to even spell subservient, but that's basically your job title. You close your eyes, exhausted by a day of stillness, memorization, and not sneezing. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell tolls. You're not sure if it's signaling evening prayer or just reminding you that your path has already been decided. You're 12 now, well, almost, which means wedding bells, or, in your case, a quiet family arrangement sealed with a curt bow and maybe a poetry exchange if your future husband's feeling romantic. You haven't even had your first real crush, but your parents have already negotiated your bride price like it's a trade deal. You'd protest, but no one's asking. You sit motionless on the veranda, watching garden carp ripple the pond surface while your maid gently combs your hair. Still floor length, still heavy as guilt. The fragrance of incense wafts in from the inner rooms, where your mother whispers with an aunt about the auspicious timing of your upcoming marriage. You want to ask who decided that 12 was an auspicious age to be handed off to a stranger, but instead you sip your tea and pretend to be serene. Historically, marriages among the high-end nobility often began disturbingly early. Girls were commonly wed as young as 12 or 13. Wed is generous. It was more like being absorbed into another family's political spreadsheet. Love had nothing to do with it. You'd be lucky if your new husband remembered your name by next week, let alone your birthday. The actual wedding isn't a grand ceremony. It's more like a carefully choreographed slumber party. On the designated night, the groom sneaks into your room because subtlety equals status. And if he returns the next morning, congratulations, you're married. If not, well, chin up. Maybe he'll give you a poem next week. There's some scholarly debate about how consensual these bedroom visits really were. Official records are silent, but your diary, if you were allowed to keep one, would likely be filled with nervous doodles and pressed flower petals, not declarations of passion. And let's talk about that husband. Chances are he's in his 20s, or 30s, or worst case scenario, pushing 40 and still calling his mother Okasama. He's probably married already too. Polygamy wasn't unusual among the elite. Men collected wives like court ranks. You might be wife number 3, or 6, or the one everyone forgets about until New Year's cards are sent out. Fringe fact, there was no word for divorce in the way we understand it. If your husband stopped visiting, that was pretty much it. You were unofficially cast off. He could remarry. You could hope your brothers would let you move back in and maybe let you teach poetry to your nieces. At 12, your education halts. You were trained to be artistic, demure, and mysterious. Not clever. Cleverness makes men uncomfortable. They want quiet elegance. Think of yourself as a particularly graceful piece of furniture. Now that you're married, you're expected to stay inside your new home. Well, home is generous. You probably don't get your own quarters, not at first. You share space with other wives or concubines like a very polite, deeply passive-aggressive dorm room. No pillow fights, just passive side-eyes and well-placed haikus about betrayal. And you can forget talking directly to your husband in daylight. Communication flows through messengers and maids, sometimes with symbolic fans or incense scents to indicate your mood. Imagine trying to have an argument using perfume and folded notes. You catch yourself looking at the garden again. The same carp, the same still pond. It feels like you're stuck in one of those folding screens, painted into stillness. But it's okay, right? At least you've got your robes. Your family says they're dyed with imported safflower and stitched with real gold thread. Too bad they weigh more than your dignity. Outside, a crow calls, breaking the silence. You feel it deep in your chest, like a little echo of freedom flapping away. You wonder if your life will ever change. Spoiler, it won't, unless your husband dies or promotes you to chief wife, which he won't, because as they say in court circles, a silent woman is a harmonious household. That crow calls again. You think it's laughing at you. The first thing they tell you after the wedding is that you now belong to your husband's household, not in the awe family way, in the you are legally, socially, and spiritually considered his possession way. Romantic, right? You used to belong to your father, and before that, technically to your mother, but only until you could walk. Now, you've been handed off like an heirloom comb, and no one really asked you how you felt about it. You start noticing it in small ways first. Your opinions no longer matter unless someone else repeats them. Your likes and dislikes are absorbed into your husband's preferences. He likes plum blossoms? Suddenly, so do you. He prefers quiet during meals. You're silent as steamed rice. You're now expected to be a living mirror, reflecting your husband's world back to him, gracefully, quietly, and without ripples. This isn't just emotional metaphor. In legal terms, women in medieval Japan had very limited rights. You can't inherit land unless your father is unusually progressive, or dead and lacking sons. You can't sue. You can't even leave your husband's house without permission. The law, the temple, and the court all agree. You are under the guardianship of a male figure, from cradle to grave. There's an odd loophole, though. In some cases, noble women could own personal property, especially their clothing, cosmetic items, and maybe a bit of pocket land if they were widows. But even then, that ownership was supervised. You can technically have things. You just can't fully control them. And if you thought your husband's other wives or concubines were your allies, think again. Rivalry is built to the architecture. Rooms are assigned by favor. Meals are portioned by status. One day, your tray might have 3 types of pickles. The next, just soup and rice. No one explains why. You're expected to notice and behave accordingly. Fringe historical tidbit? There were household ranking charts. Literally. You're on a list, like a medieval version of a reality show leaderboard, but with fewer roses and more shade. The servants take their cues from these rankings too. One day you drop your brush, and a maid scrambles to pick it up. Next week, she pretends not to hear when you call. It all depends on who your husband is favoring. And right now, he's spending a lot of time in the West Wing, where wife number 2 lives. She plays the kodo better, and her hair's shinier. Scholars still debate how much autonomy court women actually had. Some argue that behind those painted screens, women pulled strings, managing finances and family alliances through quiet diplomacy. But unless you've got a powerful father or a particularly cooperative husband, chances are you're more furniture than financier. You try to write poetry. It helps. Just a little. You compose secret verses in your head while walking the corridor. Eyes low, steps light, something about a moon behind clouds. Something about being both seen and invisible. You think of your younger self. The girl who wore robes too big and didn't know the word obedient could feel like a chain. She's still there, somewhere, behind your painted face and silent bows. She'd probably laugh if she knew that you now have to bow to a woman your own age because her kimono has one more brocade panel than yours. Sometimes, when you're alone, you look out the paper screen window and imagine what the world would be like if you could just walk out, just leave. But then you hear a soft knock and a servant saying your name, and you remember, you're not a person, you're someone's wife. You're married to a samurai now. Sounds thrilling, right? Swords, honor, maybe the occasional epic duel at dawn? That's what the stories suggest. But your real job is folding his clothes, minding your words, and praying he doesn't bring home a battlefield infection. The armor looks cool though. When he enters the estate, his wooden sandals clacking across the stone, you can't help but notice the glint of lacquered plates and the silk cords swinging from his shoulders. But he doesn't make eye contact. You're supposed to lower yours. He fought for the shogun after all. You just make sure his socks are dry. In medieval Japan, especially during the Kamakura period, samurai wives were seen as pillars of household order. That might sound empowering, but it usually meant running the estate when your husband was off waging war, and being silent and compliant when he was home. Your duty is loyalty, not the romantic kind. The kind that involves keeping his sword polished and his secrets buried. There's a niche, little historical detail you might appreciate. Samurai women were sometimes trained to wield the naginata, a long pole weapon. Not to go off on adventures though. It was mainly so you could protect the household while your husband was away. Or, let's be honest, protect yourself from bandits, drunk uncles, or the occasional aggressive goose. You've probably never held one, but you've seen one mounted on the wall, and the maid swears your mother-in-law used to twirl it in the garden when no one was looking. You wonder if you'll ever need it. The war drums don't reach your estate often. What you hear more regularly is the quiet shuffle of servants and the daily routine. Grinding rice, boiling tea, tidying rooms that no one seems to enter. You've become a kind of ghost hostess, keeping the household alive by being barely visible. When your husband's home, it's like walking on tatami eggshells. He doesn't yell. He doesn't have to. A shift in breath, a raised eyebrow, and you're already kneeling, murmuring apologies for it's something you're not even sure you did. And if he dies in battle, well, congratulations. You might be elevated to respected widow status, unless his family decides to send you off to a temple or remarry you to one of his cousins, because, reminder, you're still property. There's a moment one morning, while you're arranging dried persimmons on a tray, when you feel a sharp jolt of absurdity. You think, I know how to fold 12 different types of ceremonial origami, but I've never been more than 10 miles from this house. The thought almost makes you laugh. Almost, but you don't. Laughter, after all, is not part of the samurai wife's daily duties. Scholars sometimes point to rare examples of powerful samurai women who ran estates or advised in political matters. but they were exceptions. Usually, women of high birth with strong family names. You were married for alliance, not opinion. The ink brush you use to write festival lists feels more alive than you do. You dip it into the black pot and pause just for a second. Then you write down candied chestnuts with perfect calligraphy. It's the only part of the day that feels like yours. Later that evening, your husband returns from town. He smells like sweat and sake and maybe something less polite. You help him disrobe silently, fold the garments just so, and place them in the lacquered chest. He doesn't say thank you. He never has. Before bed, you kneel at the household shrine, bow twice, and offer a whispered prayer you're not sure anyone's listening to. The room smells like incense and quiet resignation. You lie down on your mat, hands folded over your chest, staring up at the paper ceiling, and you think, being a samurai's wife is exactly like being a prisoner, only you get better robes. The day your first child is born, everything changes, and by everything, we mostly mean your physical condition and your workload. You're not suddenly elevated to maternal glory. You're more like a biological success story with a crying side effect. A useful vessel. Congratulations. Labor for you isn't exactly a serene, candlelit water birth with the lavender oil and whale songs. You're laid out on a floor mat in a cold room while midwives chant, and a relative burns incense to keep away evil spirits. There's no doctor, no anesthesia, just grit, sweat, and the vague threat of a family ghost hovering behind a screen. You survive, somehow. And now you have a baby. A boy, if you're lucky, because that means you've fulfilled your most important duty as a woman in medieval Japan, producing a male heir. A girl? Well, she'll be swaddled in silk, sure, but everyone's kind of sighing behind your back, like you just gave them a moderately disappointing birthday present. Historically, childbirth was one of the most dangerous moments in a Japanese woman's life. Infection was common, as were complications, especially without formal medical knowledge. Even high-ranking women often died during or shortly after childbirth, their names remembered mostly as the first mother of such and such clan. You try not to think about that as you stare down at your baby's squished little face and whisper a prayer to Cannon, the goddess of mercy, because, honestly, you'll take any mercy you can get right now. And then, just when you think you get a break, the nanny hierarchy kicks in. Did you think you'd be holding your child all day? Rocking him by the fire? Not exactly. A wet nurse arrives, appointed by your husband's family. She'll be feeding your child while you return to combing your hair and writing seasonal poems for the family newsletter. You may visit your baby. You may coo softly, but not too much. Motherhood must remain dignified and balanced. Here's a fringe historical detail. Some noble women reportedly didn't see their infants for weeks after birth, especially if the child was being raised in a secondary household or by a different wife. Babies were passed around like delicate bonsai trees, depending on inheritance strategies and which lady had more clout that month. As a mother, your body is no longer yours. But let's be honest, it never really was. You're still expected to look flawless. White face powder, blackened teeth, perfectly arranged robes, while you leak, ache, and occasionally cry into your sleeve when no one's looking. Your husband doesn't change diapers. Not because he's heartless, but because that's not how it works. Men do war. Women do, well, everything else. You're expected to raise moral children who know their place, memorize the right poems, and show perfect posture by age 5. A toddler with slouchy shoulders is a family disgrace. Some scholars argue that women gained quiet power through motherhood, especially if they bore sons who grew into political players. But in your case, that power is slow to come and never guaranteed. You're still part of the background, nurturing from the shadows, your identity tied to how well your child performs. And the postpartum period? Forget rest. You're up before dawn again, overseeing household rituals, managing servants, and writing thank you notes for the temple offerings sent after the birth. You haven't slept a full night in weeks, but your calligraphy still needs to be perfect. The baby starts crying. Somewhere down the hall, you pause mid-brushstroke, heart thudding like a temple drum. You wonder if anyone will get you. Probably not. You straighten your back, blot the ink, and whisper a lullaby that no one hears. You're a mother now, but you're still mostly invisible. Your daughter is 5 now, and she's already learning to sit with her ankles tucked beneath her like a lacquered doll. She's mastered the art of silence. She speaks only when spoken to, and even then, in a voice so soft it practically dissolves in the air. You watch her from the veranda, wondering if she understands yet what kind of life she's stepping into. Probably not. She's still chasing butterflies. You want to tell her to run, to scream, to roll in the grass like a wild thing before it's too late. But instead, you remind her to keep her sleeves clean and recite her waka poetry. That's what good mothers do. Girls in medieval Japan weren't educated in the way boys were. No Confucian classics. No calligraphy drills designed to prepare them for court exams or monastic life. No sword lessons. Their curriculum was more decorative. A little reading, a lot of etiquette. How to serve tea. How to bow without showing teeth. How to keep your thoughts folded tighter than your robes. Your daughter's tutor is an elderly cousin with a pinched expression and a voice like a thread being pulled too hard. She drills your daughter on perfume blending and fan language, the ancient emoji system of courtship. Your daughter waves a folded fan in just the right motion, and the tutor nods, satisfied. It means, I acknowledge your poem, though it wounds me. You try not to sigh. There's a scholarly debate about whether these skills gave women a secret language, a kind of cultural power. But it's hard to feel powerful while learning how to crush plum blossoms into scented powder for someone else's pleasure. Fringe tidbit. Aristocratic girls were sometimes taught to compose shadow poems, ones that echoed the structure of more famous male poems, but with inverted themes. Love becomes loss. Celebration becomes quiet longing. It was like slipping your voice through a keyhole, hoping someone on the other side was listening. Still, your daughter smiles when she finishes her poem. It's a good one. Something about cranes and wind and longing. You press her tiny fingers and tell her it's beautiful. You don't tell her it might be one of the few things she'll ever create that's truly hers. When girls reached adolescence, usually around 12 or 13, they began the subtle transition into marriageability. Their sleeves lengthened. Their presence at temple ceremonies became more formal. They stopped playing tag with cousins and started practicing how to glide instead of walk. The entire household begins to murmur in low tones about matches and alliances, like your daughter is a prize T-bowl being evaluated for cracks. You start noticing visits from unfamiliar women, matchmakers dressed like they're attending a funeral for joy. They ask vague questions about your daughter's temperament and laugh politely at things she doesn't quite understand. You hate them instantly. You remember when you were her age, the terror of being noticed, the confusion of being invisible. You want to protect her, but what would that even look like? Refusing marriage? The family would lose face. Delay it? She'll just be older when it happens. Escape? Don't be ridiculous. Instead, you do what you can. You teach her to smile with her eyes, to read people's moods before they speak, to slip a thought into a sentence like a secret under a kimono sleeve. It's not much, but it's something. Later that night, you find her in the corner room, brushing her own hair and whispering lines from the Tale of Genji to herself. You stand in the doorway, unseen, and think, she doesn't know yet how much of her life has already been decided. You consider walking in and telling her everything, but you don't. Instead, you say, "Time for bed, my little moonflower," and she smiles, trusting you completely. It's a cold morning when you realize you haven't seen your reflection in days. Not because there aren't mirrors. There are plenty of polished bronze ones, tucked inside little boxes with tiny clasps. You just haven't opened one. You know what you'll find. The same painted face, the same ghost pale skin, the same person who's expected to fade gracefully into the background like a cherry blossom petal pressed in a book. Your robes weigh more than you do. 12 layers, each one dyed with the seasonal precision, crimson and pine green for autumn, lavender and white for spring. The sleeves drag like whispers. They look gorgeous, of course, especially when you move through a doorway at just the right angle. But try using the toilet in one. Seriously. Not elegant. This elaborate look isn't optional. In medieval Japan, especially among the aristocracy, appearance was a full-time job. The height of Heian-era beauty, shaved eyebrows, replaced by painted arcs high on the forehead, pitch black teeth, lacquered into a permanent smile of noble decay, skin powdered so white you risk scaring toddlers in dim lighting. You wonder what would happen if you showed your real face. Like, actually just walked out with no makeup, no wig, no robes, just your bare skin, your real eyebrows, your teeth as they are. You'd probably cause a scandal, or a haunting, maybe both. And yet, behind the scenes, there's a strange sort of competition happening. Every woman in the household knows that beauty is political, your hairstyle matters, your scent, made from ground cloves and burned seashells, matters. Even your handwriting is a kind of flirtation. Women exchange poems in hand-brush script, and if your lines were sloppy or too bold, well, it said more than words ever could. There's a fringe tidbit you overheard once. Some women would burn tiny strips of perfume-dipped paper and fan the smoke into their robes before entering a room. It wasn't just about smelling nice. It was about leaving a trace of yourself behind, an olfactory signature of grace and control. The scent was supposed to linger like a memory, like regret, the part no one says aloud. Beauty is a form of survival. If you're considered beautiful, you might be favored. If you're favored, you might be safe. It's not a guarantee, but it's something. A prettier cushion to sit on while enduring the same suffocating rules. There's ongoing debate among historians about how much influence women's beauty standards actually had on their social standing versus their bloodlines. But in daily life, you've seen how a well-draped sleeve can soften a blow, and how an expertly folded fan can open doors. You've also seen what happens to women who let themselves go. They fade, not just socially, literally. They get smaller in conversation, quieter in the corridor. No one invites them to poetry readings anymore. Your maid helps you dress each morning, layering you like a piece of art that no one's allowed to touch. You sit still for an hour while she applies the rice paste foundation, paints your eyebrows, tints your lips. It's a ritual, a kind of armor, not the kind that protects your body, but it helps you face the world with just the right amount of numbness. You sometimes dream of running into the woods in nothing but a sleeping robe, scrubbing your face clean in a stream, and smiling with your real teeth. But then you wake up, and it's time for incense, and another set of seasonal robes. Your husband doesn't notice when you wear the autumn scent instead of spring. He doesn't notice the new poem you tucked into his sleeve pocket either. But the lady 2 rooms over does, and she smiles in that way that makes your blood run just a little colder. There are no swords here, just brushes, perfume, and silence. But don't be fooled. You're still fighting. By now, you know your way around a shrine better than your own thoughts. The path of white stones crunches under your sandals as you step into the sacred grounds. Head bowed, sleeves trailing like mist. The air smells like cedar, old ash, and that strange sweet rot that always seems to cling to religious places. You came here to pray, but also because it's expected. Because pretending to find peace here is safer than not showing up at all. Religion in medieval Japan isn't one single thread. It's more like a tangled tapestry of Buddhism, Shinto, ancestor worship, and a sprinkle of household superstition. Your personal belief doesn't matter nearly as much as your performance of it. You bow twice, you clap twice, you ring the bell, you drop the coin in the offering box and ask for something soft. Safety, maybe. Or invisibility. Women were allowed in temples, sure, but only certain ones, and only in certain ways. There were rules about when and how you could pray, especially if you were menstruating. That made you ritually unclean, which meant you couldn't enter the inner sanctum. You remember one time being turned away during Obon season. The monk didn't even make eye contact, just muttered something about impurity and pointed toward the gate. There's a common story going around that some of the larger temples kept rosters of who was clean enough to approach the altar. You wonder if your name is still on some forgotten list. Probably under woman who smiles too much. You pause under the towering torii gate, looking up at the faded vermilion beams. A wind picks up, and your robe shifts like a banner. You think of the gods, not the gentle ones. The strange, slightly cruel kami that live in rivers and trees and old stones. The ones you leave offerings to, so they'll leave you alone. Here's a little oddball historical note. Some women who were widowed or disgraced, or just tired of being someone's accessory, chose to become bhikkhuni, wandering nuns. They shaved their heads, slipped into dark robes, and traveled between villages reciting sutras for food. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't safe. But it was freedom. Sort of. At least they could walk in the open air. You once met a bhikkhuni. Just once. She had sunburned cheeks and a laugh like gravel. And she offered you a lotus flower made from folded paper. She said, "Don't wait for the gods to save you. They're busy." Then she walked away barefoot, humming. But you can't become a nun. Your family would never allow it. Not unless you were already ruined. An exile, a burden, a shame they needed to tidy away with spiritual tape. You're still intact, still useful, so no robes for you. Just prayers and silence. There's scholarly debate about whether Buddhist teachings improved or worsened women's status in medieval Japan. On one hand, the idea of karma and rebirth offered a kind of spiritual equality. On the other, a lot of monks insisted that being born female was the result of bad karma to begin with. That's a fun thought to carry around all day. You light a stick of incense and offer it at the altar. The smoke coils upward like a question that won't be answered. Around you, other women do the same. You all kneel, like petals fallen in a circle. One of the temple cats brushes past your foot. It doesn't care about your prayers, your marriage, your perfectly powdered face. It blinks slowly, like it knows something you don't, and disappears into the bamboo grove. You press your hands together and whisper a final wish, not out loud, but into the soft space behind your teeth. "Please, just let me matter." And then you get up, smooth your robe, and return home, because your role isn't finished, and neither is your performance. The messenger arrives just after dusk, his sandals dusty, his expression blank in that official sort of way. That means something is either deeply routine or quietly disastrous. You receive the letter with both hands, fingers perfectly poised, heart thudding beneath your ceremonial layers. You already know it's about your husband. You just don't know which version of him the message contains. Dead, victorious, exiled, or remarried. It's news of a posting. He's being sent to a provincial post, somewhere far away, cold, and full of pine trees and wild dogs. Your household is expected to pack, relocate, and act like this is a great honor. But you know better. A provincial post is less like a promotion and more like being politely shoved out of the capital's way. You've heard stories about these assignments. The roads are long and bandit-ridden. The local officials often speak in rough dialects, and the people look at you like you've dropped in from another planet. There's no poetry salon in the mountains, no imported incense, no well-placed mirror to adjust your painted smile. Traveling for women in medieval Japan was rare and uncomfortable. Carriages were tightly enclosed, little wooden cubes draped with cloth, carried or wheeled depending on status. The noblewoman's palanquin was more coffin than coach. You sit cross-legged for hours, swaying gently, trying not to vomit from the combination of heat, motion, and the scent of your own perfume curling back into your nose. At night, you're lodged in roadside inns or temple annexes. The walls are thin, and the bedding smells like rice sacks. You miss your garden. You miss your daughter's whispers. You even miss the lady 2 rooms over who glares at you over her fan. This is worse than court politics. At least in Kyoto, you understood the rules. When you arrive, the province is quieter than expected, quieter and colder. The local magistrate bows deeply and offers ceremonial rice, but you can tell he resents your presence. Your husband is already meeting with officials, trying to negotiate taxes or fish rights, or something equally thrilling. You, however, must set up the provincial court, which is basically a glorified picnic in a damp estate house. You're expected to bring courtly elegance to the countryside. That means orchestrating poetry contests, seasonal rituals, and polite conversation with women who have no idea why your sleeves are so long, or your voice so high. They stare at you like you're made of porcelain and disappointment. There's a fringe detail you learn from a local storyteller. The region you're in believes women shouldn't speak near shrines on full moons. It draws fox spirits. You're not sure if that's a warning or a compliment. Either way, you keep your voice low. The days stretch out like damp scrolls. You try to teach the locals how to blend incense. One of them laughs. You try to read poetry under a gnarled pine tree. It drops a pine cone on your head. You write a letter to your daughter that won't arrive for weeks, maybe months, and tuck a pressed leaf inside, just to remind her the world is bigger than Kyoto. Scholars argue that provincial postings gave aristocratic women a rare glimpse into different parts of Japan, into real life beyond the capital. That may be true, but you're not here for cultural expansion. You're here because your husband lost a political chess match, and now you're collateral in a fur-lined robe. Sometimes, late at night, you sit outside and stare at the mountains. You breathe in air that isn't laced with incense or formality, and you feel almost human. Cold, yes. Out of place, absolutely. But unobserved. And in that invisibility, there's a kind of shaky peace. A fox cries out in the hills. You don't answer, but for a moment, you almost want to. You're back in the capital before spring, but nothing feels the same. The plum blossoms have bloomed without you. The poetry salons went on without you. Even the mirror in your dressing chamber reflects someone slightly more brittle than you remember. Your return was not triumphal. A modest palanquin, a servant fewer than you left with, and no parade of gifts from grateful provincial governors. Just tired shoulders and a new appreciation for warm floors and clean bedding. Your husband has aged, or maybe he's just tired of pretending he hasn't. You both perform your reunion with a careful choreography of a no play, slow, silent, and dripping with unseen meaning. You thought you'd feel relieved to be back, but instead you feel out of sync, like a seasonal robe worn 1 month too early. The politics have shifted while you were gone. Court alliances have reconfigured like clouds reshaped by wind. And you were gone too long to be central, too recently returned to be fresh. You are background again, pleasant, decorative, politely irrelevant. There's a scroll gathering dust in your room, detailing the current ranks of the emperor's consorts. Your name isn't on it. It never was. But now, the absence stings more. You used to wonder if your husband might elevate you. Now you just hope he doesn't replace you. A curious fringe tradition has emerged among your peers. Talisman threaded hairpieces said to protect your reputation from gossip, supposedly woven by monks and blessed by silent prayers. You wear one now, just in case. It doesn't stop the glances, but maybe it makes you feel a little less exposed. You try to resume your old patterns. You host a poetry night. Only half the usual women show up. The others have moved on to newer salons, more fashionable hosts. You send out carefully inked invitations, bribe a few servants with wrapped sweets to casually mention your gathering. Still, the room feels hollow. The candlelight doesn't flicker the same way. Your daughter is older now. She glides instead of walks. She bows just a second longer than required. You see her watching you, studying your rhythms, learning what not to ask. She's become a woman while you weren't looking, and she's better at it than you ever were. There's a scholarly argument that Heian court culture placed immense value on layered subtleties, emotion as performance art, sorrow as a social grace. You now live inside that argument. Every sigh must be weighed, every glance calibrated. You once thought this was elegant. Now it feels like trying to breathe through silk. Your husband grows distant, not cruel, just absent. You hear his laughter from the other wing of the estate, where a new lady-in-waiting giggles too much and walks like she's never touched mud. You don't ask questions. You know the answers. So you write. Not poems for the salon, not letters to family, but secret verses, inked onto old paper, then tucked behind screens and under cushions like pressed petals. They're sharp and quiet and not meant for anyone's eyes. They feel more like yours than anything you've ever penned. There's a passage from the pillow book that lingers in your mind. It is in the moments of fleeting beauty that we find our true selves. You wonder if Sei Shonagon ever felt like this, like herself was slipping out between brushstrokes, vanishing into layers of social paint. At night, you stand by the window and let your outer robe slip off, just for a moment. Your skin touches the breeze. It's still cold, but it's real. You wonder how many other women in your position have stood in this exact pose, unadorned and unobserved, and thought, I am here. I am still here. You light a single candle, write one more secret line, and blow it out. Then you return to bed, face painted, spine straight, performance resumed. Your daughter is preparing for marriage now. It's happening faster than you'd like. Not just the planning, but the way she speaks, the way she stands, the way she no longer clings to your sleeve when she laughs. She's already begun reciting poetry to herself in the courtyard, as though rehearsing for some invisible audience. You catch her practicing how to cry prettily. She thinks you don't notice. The match is considered favorable. The groom is the son of a mid-ranking court official, the kind of family with just enough ambition to be exhausting and just enough favor to be useful. You've never seen his face. You've seen his handwriting, though. Sloppy, slanted, overconfident. You hold the poem he sent your daughter like it's something dangerous. Arranged marriages are standard, of course. Love is not part of the deal. Never was. This is about position, alliance, reputation, and dowry. Emotions are irrelevant. Still, you can't help hoping he'll be kind to her. Not because you expect it, but because you've lived the alternative. Your daughter bows as you dress her for the engagement ceremony. Her robe is pale lavender, spring colors, hopeful ones. Her hair is oiled, combed, and arranged in a fall down her back like ink on silk. She looks exquisite. She also looks like someone stepping into a very quiet trap. You whisper advice between hairpins. Don't speak unless asked, but don't stay silent too long. Smile with your eyes, not your teeth. Never let them see you cry, unless it's for a poem. She nods, absorbing it all like a page absorbing ink. She doesn't ask why. She already knows. There's a quirky tradition you're trying to ignore. In some regions, brides carried a tiny ceremonial knife tucked into their sash, not for defense, but as a symbol of their obedience and readiness to sacrifice. You don't give her one. You give her a folded fan instead, painted with cranes. The ceremony is exhausting. Formal, muted, filled with layered greetings and vague promises spoken through intermediaries. Your daughter kneels until her legs go numb. You kneel beside her, thinking of all the women who have done this before. How many smiled through cracked lips? How many wanted to run? Scholars debate how much autonomy noblewomen had in these arrangements. Technically, a woman could refuse a match. In practice, doing so meant social exile, or worse, a permanent stay in the back building, where women were kept out of sight, out of memory. You don't mention this to your daughter. You just fix her collar one last time. Afterward, the household is full of soft laughter and half-sung congratulations. Servants bustle. Relatives nod approvingly. Your husband is drunk on plum wine and vaguely satisfied. The world is balanced again, for them. But you, later that night, find yourself staring at your daughter's empty sleeping mat. She's in another wing now, learning how to hold a teacup just so, how to accept folded poetry without flinching. You lie back on your own mat and remember when she used to sneak into your bed at night after thunderstorms. There's silence now, not peace, just quiet. You whisper a prayer, not to any specific God, just into the stillness. Please let her keep something of herself. You don't know if it's possible, but you ask anyway. The next morning, she comes to you before sunrise, still in her night robes, her hair uncombed. She doesn't speak. She just sits beside you and leans her head on your shoulder. It only lasts a minute, but it's enough. You don't tell her how marriage will wear her down in places no one else will see. You don't tell her how a smile can become armor. You just sit with her in the blue morning light. Two women in a world built on appearances. And for that brief moment, there are no poems, no robes, no mirrors. Just you and her, still breathing. The seasons roll forward like scrolls on a lacquered stand. Crisp spring breezes turning to thick summer heat, then into the heavy scent of rotting leaves and wet tatami. Time doesn't wait for your grief. And make no mistake, what you're feeling now is grief. Not because someone has died, but because something has shifted in a way that can't be undone. Your daughter is married now, moved out, installed like a carefully chosen ornament in another man's house. The palanquin that carried her away creaked as it turned the corner, and you swear you heard the silence rush in behind it like a tide. That's the sound of a chapter closing. The house is quieter, not empty. You're still here, your husband is still grumbling in his study, and the servants still rustle like leaves, but the spark is gone. Your reflection feels softer now, not from age, but from exhaustion. You've performed so long, the mask has started to mold to your face. You spend more time in the back garden, the one no one else uses. the one with the moss growing wild around the rocks. It's technically untidy, unbecoming of your station, but you don't care. You sit under the old plum tree, tracing patterns in the dirt with your hairpin, and you listen to the birds argue overhead. It feels more honest than most court conversations. Sometimes you catch the eyes of young ladies in waiting as they walk by. They look at you with a mix of pity and curiosity, like you're a painting that started to fade. One of them even asked you once if you remembered what it was like to fall in love. You smiled and said, "No one falls in love in court. We fall into contracts." Then you gave her a piece of candied ginger and sent her on her way. There's an old, slightly obscure belief you remember from your childhood that when a woman's daughter marries, part of her spirit becomes dormant. Not dead, not gone, just curled up like a fox in winter. You wonder if that's what's happened to you. If some small fire inside you has decided it's time to nap. You still attend court functions, of course. Appearances must be maintained, but you find yourself sitting further from the action, your sleeves a little less colorful, your hair a little looser. People notice, but they don't comment. Not directly. Instead, they whisper things like elegantly subdued or quietly refined, which are both court speak for past her season. A minor scholar at court recently read a passage aloud, claiming that a woman's value increases after marriage because she's wiser, more serene, more reflective. Everyone nodded. You sipped your tea and thought, more reflective, like a fading mirror maybe. Still, you didn't argue. It wouldn't be proper. Your husband now spends long hours with his newest favorite. She wears rose-colored robes and applies her blush too high. You don't hate her. You simply disregard her. She's young. She'll learn. And in the oddest way, her presence frees you. He no longer expects your flattery, your cleverness, or your presence at night. So you retreat deeper into your own space. You begin copying sutras, not for virtue, but for the calm repetition. You paint fans that you never intend to give away. You compose haiku and then burn them over incense. There's a fringe detail passed around in some circles. Certain noblewomen would, in their later years, keep jars filled with ink-stained water from their writings, as if to capture the ghosts of their thoughts. You start one of your own. It sits beside your sleeping mat, quietly dark. One evening, you receive a letter. Not from your husband, not from court, from your daughter. The handwriting is delicate, but sure. She says she is well. She says her husband is quiet and not unkind. She says she misses your garden. She's pressed a small dried camellia into the paper. You hold the letter for a long time. Then you place it beside your jar of ink water, like an offering. It's not joy you feel, but it is enough. The years start curling inward like the edges of an old scroll. Things fade, things soften, not in a dramatic way. There are no sweeping tragedies, no great exiles, no sudden downpours during poetry readings. Just quiet decline, like candlelight shrinking lower in the bowl. Your joints ache before the rain now. You feel the stiffness in your fingers when tying your outer robe. Your hair is still long, but it tangles easier, and you let your maid pin it higher on your head, more for comfort than beauty. Your mirror is still polished daily, but you've stopped looking into it with expectation. Now it's just a habit. Your husband is sick more often. He coughs in the mornings, complains of drafts, naps without warning. The new favorite has quietly disappeared. Maybe she married off. Maybe she just got bored. You don't ask. You tend to your husband when expected, brush his sleeves straight, sit with him in formal silence. It's strangely companionable, like living beside a river you no longer fear will flood. One afternoon, a servant accidentally spills rice near the threshold. In the old days, you would have scolded. Now, you kneel beside her and help pick up the grains. The two of you side by side on the cool floor. She thanks you with her eyes, then scurries off. You don't tell anyone. That moment feels like a secret gift. You've begun exchanging letters more regularly with your daughter. They are small things, these letters. Descriptions of flowering trees, snippets of overheard poetry, a recipe for pickled plums. But each one feels like a breath, a thread pulling you forward. She writes that she's expecting her first child. You sit with that letter in your lap for hours. You don't cry, not really. But something inside you stretches, like the moment before a branch blossoms. You imagine her sitting beneath her own tree, hand on her stomach, wondering what kind of world she's bringing life into. There's a whispered debate among scholars about the roles grandmothers played in Heian society. Some say they were gently revered, quiet anchors of the household. Others argue they were tolerated at best, politely shunned aside in favor of newer beauties and younger voices. You're not sure which you'll be. You suspect both might be true. Your garden has grown wild, not chaotic, just full. Ferns spread under the stone lanterns. The plum tree has dropped a branch, but still blooms fiercely. You let it be. You've stopped pruning things that survive on their own. You attend fewer gatherings now. No one says anything, but you know your absence is noted in whispers, not inquiries. At a recent seasonal festival, a woman you barely knew touched your sleeve and said, "You used to write the most beautiful verses." Past tense. You just smiled. You no longer feel the need to perform offense or grace. There's a quirky superstition among the older court ladies that women who write too many sad poems invite melancholy spirits into their homes. You wonder if that's why your ink jar never dries completely. Still, you keep writing them, carefully, sparingly, tucked into the hollow of a bamboo box sealed with lacquer. At night you sleep earlier. Your dreams are softer. Sometimes you walk through misty temple courtyards where the stone is warm under your feet. Sometimes your daughter is small again, asking you to tie her sash, her fingers sticky with plums. Sometimes you're young, your hair unpinned, standing in the mountains with no mirrors, no robes, no names. Just you, breathing. You wake in the dark. The house is quiet. You reach for your ink brush, not to write, but to hold. And for just a moment, you feel weightless. You receive word by messenger just before the year turns. Your daughter has given birth to a girl. A girl. You hold the letter in your lap while incense curls past your cheek. Outside, the snow melts in uneven patches, revealing slick green moss and the brittle stems of last season's flowers. You thought you would cry. You don't. Instead, you smile. Tired? Yes, but real. A granddaughter means everything and nothing all at once. She's a continuation of your line, a blossom on a distant branch. And yet, you also know too well the path her life will likely follow. Layered robes, painted smiles, performances mistaken for identity. But she will also laugh, learn, run, whisper secrets into sleeves. Maybe, just maybe, she will also write. Your daughter names her Akiko. Bright child. You practice saying the name aloud, letting it roll gently off your tongue like river stones. Akiko. You write a letter of congratulations. You don't include advice, you simply press a sprig of early plum blossom between the folds and seal it with wax. Sometimes silence is more elegant than instruction. Not long after, your husband takes to bed for good. It isn't dramatic. He doesn't cry out or grasp your hand with trembling fingers. He just stops asking for anything. You sit with him sometimes, reading old poems in a soft voice. He doesn't respond, but you think he listens. It's possible he still prefers the sound of your voice to silence, even now. In the final days, a priest visits. You light incense. You kneel by his side. When he goes, it is with a long sigh, like a man slipping into sleep after a long bath. You feel no sudden grief, just a vast stillness. In the days after, people arrive with their paper condolences and overly rehearsed bows. You thank them all. You serve tea. You dress in unadorned white and let your hair fall loosely for the first time in decades. You find it's a relief, this unmasking. There's a strange dignity in being visibly untethered. A fringe belief in some court circles claims that widows who live quietly and without ornament for a year are given an extra layer of soul by the gods. No one can really explain what that means, but you like the idea, becoming more of yourself instead of less. You begin spending your days by the window, overlooking the back garden. You rarely speak unless spoken to, but your presence becomes something people seek out. Servants come to ask advice on arrangements. Distant nieces send their first poems for your approval. Even younger wives at court sometimes send questions, folded and perfumed, about how to endure without hardening. You answer simply, "Let yourself soften." Scholars now and then argue about how Heian women understood aging. Some call it a descent. Others frame it as a slow ascension toward clarity. You suspect it's both. Your joints ache, your eyes blur by candlelight, but your mind has never been sharper. You no longer care who speaks first in a room, or how your sleeves compare to another's. You just are. You've taken to walking the garden barefoot, even in the morning dew. The cold stone wakes your feet, makes you feel your body again. It's dangerous, you've been told. But so was being born a woman, and you survived that. One night, under a full moon, you unfold one of your old secret poems. You meant to burn them all eventually, but not yet. This one reads simply, "When no one is watching, the mirror sighs with relief. Even it tires too." You smile. You don't remember when you wrote it, but you know it's true. Tomorrow your daughter and Akiko will visit. You've prepared sweet rice cakes, asked the servant to clean the garden path, and found a shawl embroidered with cranes. You'll tell the baby a story, not one from books, but one you lived. Not because you expect her to remember, but because the telling will remind you both that stories, like women, are never truly silent. The morning arrives soft and slow, like the hush before a snowfall. You wake before the sun, already feeling the weight of the day. Not heavy, just full. You rise, dressed in a layered robe of soft grays and pale green. Something comfortable but still proper. You pin your hair up yourself. It takes longer than it used to, but the movements are familiar, even tender. Your daughter arrives just after breakfast, carrying little Akiko bundled in silks far too fine for a child. The baby squeals the moment she sees you, reaching out with chubby hands that know nothing yet of poetry or politics or mirrors. You take her, and for a moment you forget everything you've ever worried about. She smells like warm rice and new beginnings. Your daughter bows formally, then grins the way she used to when she was small and mischievous. You take tea together on the veranda, while Akiko naps in a basket beside the plum tree, and for a short while, it's like time folds gently inward. All the versions of your life, girl, wife, mother, widow, settling in around you like old friends. You tell her about your garden, the odd turtle that lives beneath the rock, the heron that visits on rainy days, the way the moss glows under moonlight. She listens, truly listens. You wonder if she sees you now, not just as her mother, but as a woman with a full life behind her. That's a different kind of love. Later, you give her one of your hidden poems. Folded into a fan, it reads, "Some things bloom in shade." Long after spring has ended, quiet is a gift. She reads it. She blinks fast. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. There's a story floating around, barely remembered, about a noblewoman who, after her daughter gave birth, moved to a small hermitage in the hills. She was said to have lived there for years, painting the clouds and speaking only when the wind stirred the bamboo. Some say she was mad. Others say she had finally found peace. No one really knows. But you think of her often now. You won't go to the hills. Not yet. But the idea lives in a small corner of your mind, soft and golden like candlelight. That evening, after your daughter and granddaughter leave, you walk the garden once more, alone now. Your knees creak, and your pace is slow, but your steps are sure. The moon is full. It catches on the wet leaves, and the stones shine like polished jade. You pause at the plum tree, the same one that once shaded your daughter's childhood games, the same one she once wrote about in a clumsy poem you pretended not to cry over. You kneel beside it, pressing your hand to the cool bark, and in that moment you feel the entire story of your life. Not as a tragedy, not as a caution, but as a quietly defiant poem written on silk. You lived, you endured, you softened without vanishing, you bent without breaking, and in your wake, you leave not just a daughter, not just a granddaughter, but a pattern of strength wrapped in beauty, pressed quietly into the seams of a world that almost never noticed you. And yet, you were here. Now your breath slows, and the garden fades into soft mist. The stones beneath your feet warm into memory, and the sound of distant bells rolls through your chest like a gentle tide. You feel the silk at your shoulders fall away, and the ink of old poems evaporate into twilight air. All that pressure, all that expectation softens now, like the edge of a dream curling into the quiet. You've survived the mirrors and masks, the expectations sewn into every sleeve. You've given and guided and grown, and now You rest. The air is still. A crane takes flight, slow and silent, across the lake of your imagination. You watch it rise, its wings casting no shadow, its call echoing faintly like a lullaby you once hummed in a quieter time. There's no court now, no husband, no daughter, no name, just breath, just space, just peace. Let the robes fall, let the lanterns dim, let the wind carry your story away, like ash from the end of a long burning incense stick. You are safe, you are free, you can sleep.